By the end of this episode, some of you will want to hang me and others will have a newfound respect for Irish whiskey. But either way, I'm going to talk today about how to introduce yet more people to the joys of Irish whiskey in ways that may seem sacrilegious to some, but hopefully will help increase the reach of our lovely brown water. Welcome to episode number 15 of Stories and Sips. I'm Barry Chandler and I'm in a new setting today for this episode, a whole 30 feet away from the usual location. I had my road crew, also known as my wife, help me move my lighting and my cameras to the kitchen of the Chandler household for a very different kind of episode today. Now, you are surely aware by now that Stories and Sips exists to introduce more people, especially Americans, because that's where I'm based, to Irish whiskey. I want them to try it, I want them to learn about it, enjoy it, develop deep emotional bonds with the people and the products so that they make a trip to Ireland. Maybe they visit their favourite distillery or try the whiskey in an authentic Irish pub. But unfortunately, 80% of the whiskey consumed in America today is sold as shots. And if there's one thing I hate more than TVs in bars, it's seeing people slam a shot of Irish whiskey that we all know has spent 3 to 5 years in a barrel, aging peacefully, only to be downed in 3 seconds. It does seem like an opportunity missed for the drinker. I mean, after all, wouldn't it be much nicer to enjoy that whiskey for a greater reason than just to get drunk? I mean, what's the point in that? Now, I'm also aware that my greatest chance of increasing awareness in the United States is to appeal to as wide an audience as possible, and not just the whiskey purists and self-proclaimed experts. I have to reach across the aisle to those who shoot their whiskey to see if they'd be open to trying it another way. Now, certainly sipping it in a whiskey glass is one way, but that won't be for everyone. Fortunately, there is another way to try Irish whiskey, and many Irish whiskey brands have really recognized this additional pathway to the consumer. Combined sales of Jameson Caskmate's Stout and IPA edition, for example, just surpassed the 1 million case a year mark. And much of those sales were to do with their popularity, not just as sipping whiskies, but as whiskies that are used as excellent cocktail ingredients. And I'm not just talking about whiskey and cokes, but complex, flavoursome, world-class cocktails that are benefiting from the addition of the Irish drop. So it was with great excitement that I learned a month ago that my application to take part in a cocktail competition had been accepted. And this was no ordinary cocktail competition. Rather than professional bartenders participating, this competition was for amateurs. Hence the name, I'm Not Really a Bartender cocktail competition. So I saw this contest as a great opportunity to sneakily get the judges and the audience to taste Irish whiskey, maybe in ways they'd never tasted it before. And so it was that last week I found myself behind the bar in Columbus, Ohio, in front of a live audience, competing against a priest and the head of liquor control for the state of Ohio, which incidentally is one of the largest single purchasers of alcohol in the world. Ohio is a controlled state in America, which means the distilleries sell to the state and the state sells to distributors and retailers. The stakes were high. If I got on the wrong side of the priest, I could be bound for hell. And if the head of liquor control was upset, maybe Irish whiskey would be sidelined. So there were 3 rounds in the cocktail contest. The first was to prepare a simple round of drinks. The second to come up with your own version of a margarita, and the third round was to prepare a cocktail of your own invention. So I knew that I only had those last 2 rounds to get Irish whiskey firmly in people's minds. And I also knew that the alcohol itself was not going to be enough. This channel is called Stories and Sips for a reason. It's not just about what's in the bottle, it's the tales of the people and the circumstances surrounding it, the stories. So I'm going to share with you today the 2 cocktails I made and their stories, in the hopes that if you're a bartender, maybe you'll find new ways to use Irish whiskey. If you're used to shooting your whiskey, you might try it in a cocktail. And if you're already a whiskey purist, maybe, just maybe, you'll broaden your horizon. So, to the first cocktail, reinventing the margarita. So I'm going to make it for you and tell the story. So in the 1920s, a woman left from Cork. She was an immigrant, bound for New York. And when she got to New York, she found a job. And there she met a man called Juan. And Juan was a Mexican man. And they fell in love. And shortly after that, they got married. And Margaret and Juan, they were really in love, but they didn't like the hustle and bustle of New York so much. And so after a while of being in New York, they decided they were going to move out of New York, and they decided to go to his native home, which was Tijuana, just south of the American-Mexican border, and that's where they moved to. Now, when Margaret Murphy went to Tijuana, she had a lot of trouble getting used to the food there. The Mexican food was quite spicy, and it was very different to the Irish food that she was used to, potato being her main diet in Ireland. Now, you can't live on potatoes alone. Trust me, I've tried. But she couldn't take to the spicy food in Mexico. So Juan was forever trying to get her to try local foods in the hope that she'd find something that she liked. Every day he'd come up with something new. He might make a new dish for her. He might bring home something from the store that he found. But anyway, one day he came home from his job at the race course in Tijuana, which is where he worked, and he said, I have found the perfect drink. You're going to love it. So he brought home this recipe, and he made this drink for her. Let me add the last piece there. 5 drops of this. I'll tell you the recipe in a second. So he brought home this drink, and he said, you're going to love it. And so he built the drink, and then he shook it in front of her, just like this. And he said, I'm convinced now that when you try this, you'll finally have found something that you like, Margaret. So she was open-minded, and she said that she'd try it. So he got the drink, and he poured it out for her. So she picked up the glass, and she took a sip of the cocktail, and she said, what is that? And he said, Margaret, that is a margarita. And she said, well, what's in it? And he said, tequila. And she said, well, I've never had tequila. I'm not sure what that is. And he said, well, it's like Mexican whiskey. Her ears popped up. She said, whiskey? No. I'll show you whiskey. So she didn't mind the drink, but she said it wasn't complete. So the next day she went out and she found her favorite pot still Irish whiskey, which was very popular in the United States before Prohibition. She came back home with her bottle of Jameson pot still whiskey, and she remade the drink for Juan. And he put it up to his lips and he tasted it, and his eyes opened wide. He said, that is the greatest drink I've ever had in my life. And when she told him what was in it, he said to her, Margaret, I'm going to name this after you. This is the Margarita Murphy. And he said, in honor of both of our loves of potatoes, Margaret coming from Ireland, of course, and the Mexicans' love of potatoes, we're going to garnish it with a little wedge of potato, and we're going to call that the Margarita Murphy. So this was the first cocktail that I served and my way to get Irish whiskey in front of the judges. So what were the ingredients of that? Well, I used 1/4 ounce of agave syrup. I used 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice. I had fresh lime juice in the cocktail competition, but we're not made of money here in the Chandler household. So you got Rose's lime juice here. I used 3/4 of an ounce of dry curacao, an orange curacao, and then 2 ounces of 12-year-old redbreast. Controversial inclusion there, redbreast, and then 5 drops of saline solution, a salt solution. So typically margaritas are served on the rocks. Typically they've got a salted rim. I put the salt in there as a kind of an added little pop to separate out some of those ingredients. So why did I use redbreast? Well, redbreast is a pot still whiskey that obviously has been aged for 12 years. Dry curacao has been barrel aged as well, and I thought the combination of both of those would be fantastic together. And then of course you've got the sweetness from the lime juice and the agave syrup. So this Margarita Murphy met with great response. The judges asked for a second cocktail to be made so they could taste more of it, and so that was the Margarita Murphy. And so it was on to the third round. This was going to be my last chance to convince the judges that I should snatch victory from the jaws of the priest and the superintendent of liquor control. So I knew I had to pull out all the stops. I had to deliver a cocktail that was really going to wow them. And so here's what I came up with, and I'll tell you the story as I go. So in the 1800s in Ireland, it wouldn't have been proper for women to be seen drinking alcohol in public. That would have been frowned upon. But at the same time, there was a well-known wine and spirit importer in Dublin called Mitchell & Sons. And Mitchell & Sons opened a tea room in Grafton Street. And that was a well-known spot where women could go in and they could order a cup of tea. And if they ordered it with a little wink, they'd get their cup of tea served up to them. But it wouldn't be tea in the cup at all. It would be port or sherry, and so none of the men in the bar or in the tea rooms would know that they were drinking anything other than a cup of tea. And so Mitchell & Sons would be full up all the time with women who of course deserved their drop like anybody else did, but society at the time frowned upon it. But Mitchell & Sons delivered. And so I think that women deserve equality in all areas of life, including getting an old drink. And so Mitchell & Sons became well known for that. And of course, when Mitchell & Sons were finished serving up the port and the sherry in these teacups for the happy women, they would then send the empty barrels of port and the empty barrels of sherry over the bridge to the Jameson distillery, and they would have those barrels filled up with single pot still Irish whiskey. And then those barrels would be brought back. They'd be brought back to the cellars underneath Mitchell & Sons, and there they'd be aged for a period of years, maybe 5 years, maybe 7 years, all the way up to 15 years. And after the aging process was finished, they would be bottled. But when the barrels were put into the cellars, they were daubed with a spot of paint, maybe a spot of blue paint if it was to be aged for 5 years, green paint if it was to be aged for maybe seven years or so, yellow daub of paint if it was to be aged for about 10 years, and then red if it was to be aged for 15 years. And so that's how the Spot range of whiskies got their name. I've got Green Spot here, which I'll talk a little bit about, and they were known as the Spot range of whiskies, and they came as a result of Mitchell & Sons aging their whiskey underneath the cellars in Dublin. And we still have those pot whiskies today, including the recent release of Red Spot whiskey. So, in honour of women and equality, and in honour of Mitchell & Sons and the re-release of Red Spot whiskey, I served up in the cocktail competition for the third round a spot of tea. And it's a very simple cocktail, and I'll tell you what I've put into it, and it's got a typically Irish, not just an Irish story, but some great Irish ingredients. So I started with here 3/4 of an ounce of Barry's tea syrup. So you've seen Barry's tea here in front of my bottles throughout this video. I made a syrup of equal parts tea and sugar using a great Cork favourite there, Barry's tea. That's the tea syrup here. I then added 3/4 of an ounce of Benedictine, which is obviously an herbal infusion with about 27 different herbs. The Benedictine monks used to make this, and I thought, if I'm going to compete with a priest, I better have God on my side a little bit in some way, and so I used Benedictine. And then finally 2 to 2.5 ounces, a little bit of a heavy pour on purpose, of Green Spot. And what you have in the Green Spot Irish whiskey, and then I garnish it with a slice of lemon. So walking past that, there's no doubt in your mind that somebody's drinking a cup of tea. The marriage of these ingredients, in addition, 2 to 3 drops of tiki bitters, and these tiki bitters are quite tannic, and so they combine very well with the tea, and they give that tannic kind of a consistency to the cocktail. But the combination of these very simple ingredients has produced a very delicate tea, which goes very well with the teacup, and I think it makes for a wonderful cocktail to showcase Irish whiskey. Look, next to sipping a fine Irish whiskey, the next best way to enjoy it, in my mind, is to combine it with the right ingredients. It introduces a whole new world of opportunity. I also think it lowers the barriers of entry to those who might not go straight for a measure of whiskey, but they're maybe used to drinking cocktails. And if we think about how many cocktail menus there are in the US, we have a far greater chance of growing our audience by meeting them where they already are. I mean, think about the growth of Jameson through their Jameson and ginger cocktails and their associated advertising over the past 10 years. And so how did these cocktails fare against a priest and the superintendent of liquor control? Well, I'm delighted to say that whether it was the whiskey or the stories or just a bunch of Blarney, I won first place in the cocktail competition, and now I get to wear this lovely medal everywhere I go, including to Whiskey Live next week. Get to wear this everywhere I go. And I'm delighted too that a spot of tea, this cocktail in honour of Mitchell & Sons, is now going to be added to the cocktail menu, complete with the teacup, at Citizens Trust in Columbus, Ohio, one of the city's top cocktail bars, starting in January. And of course, bars like the Dead Rabbit in New York have been experimenting with Irish whiskey cocktails to great success for many years. And I'd love to see more bars grow their selection of Irish whiskies so that more unsuspecting Americans can be introduced to the joys of Irish whiskey. So there you have it. If you still want to hang me, you know where to find me. I'll be at Whiskey Live in Dublin this week. But before you hurl insults at me, first try one of these or something like them. You might even like them. And I would like to thank the extremely professional and knowledgeable mentor I had for this contest, Logan Demi, bartender at Citizens Trust in Columbus. He was my mentor because they didn't want to let any old yahoo behind the bar playing with alcohol, and so Logan helped me come up with these cocktails and think through the recipes. And the icing on the cake was that Logan was himself a Pernod Ricard brand ambassador. He's been through the Whiskey Academy in Middleton, so was very familiar with the Green Spot and with the Redbreast, and was delighted to help. So thank you, Logan, for all of your help. So there you have it. More ways to introduce Irish whiskey to unsuspecting Americans. Sláinte. I'm going to drink some of this now. Sure, it's only a cup of tea. If you liked this episode, and sure why wouldn't you, isn't it about whiskey? Please subscribe so that I can foist my opinions upon you and slowly, subliminally and successfully convert you to the joys of Irish whiskey. You can subscribe to this episode on iTunes, SoundCloud and wherever you get your podcasts by simply searching for Stories and Sips. And of course you can see every episode in full Technicolor by subscribing on YouTube. And if you know a friend who might like Stories and Sips, then be a good friend to them and forward them a link so that they too can be converted to the Irish nectar. Sláinte.